Welcome everyone across the world to today's question and answer session on all you ever wanted to know about fundraising but were afraid to ask. A free webinar offered by fundsforngos.org to help you succeed in fundraising. As you know, fundsforngos.org is one of the leading sources of funding information for NGOs around the world. Using technology, we connect NGOs to useful information, including capacity building tools, how-to guides, training webinars, and resources to help you fundraise successfully. Please be sure to sign up and subscribe to Funds for NGOs free email funding alert service. To see a schedule of upcoming webinars, please visit webinars.fundsforngos.org. This link can also be used to view previous webinars. Thank you all for participating, a warm welcome, and let's start with today's webinar. For any questions, please visit the GoToWebinar Global Customer Support page, and please feel free to use the webinar panel found on the right-hand side of the screen to type in any additional questions or comments you have at any time. We'll do our best to try to respond to those as they come in, but we have quite a few participants today, so it may not be possible. But just to let everyone also know that the webinar today is being recorded and will be made available online. Today's topic is all you ever wanted to know about fundraising but were afraid to ask. And the goal of today's webinar is to help NGOs across the world to gain a greater understanding of fundraising topics. So let me introduce one of today's trainers, Eric Dediger. Eric?
Well, thanks, Megan. And this is welcome everybody to today's webinar, the Q&A on all you ever wanted to know about fundraising but were afraid to ask. And you can see me here on the top right hand in front of our office building, or at least our office is in that building, and our office is right north of the UN Secretariat in New York City. And as you know, we had a big power outage, a big storm come in less than 2 weeks ago, and the after effects in New York are still felt. There's still lots of people without electricity, etc. And that's why we had to delay this Q&A the first time. So I hope you can you understand. But Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Eric. I also work with you at Philanthropia, our fundraising consultancy based in New York City. And I spend a lot of time there doing prospect research for international clients from all different NGOs that we work with, UNICEF, different INGOs and grassroots NGOs. So I'll talk about that when we get to those questions. And yeah, Eric.
Yeah, and just very quickly, I've worked in fundraising for well over 15 years and in nonprofit for over 20. And I've worked for small NGOs. I've worked in Asia and Africa, in Europe, and quite some time in the United States. And I've also worked for UNICEF and the International Labour Organization. And I hope to share some of that experience with you, and Megan will do the same. Thanks.
So today's questions that we're going to be discussing today have all been selected from the Funds for NGOs forum entry on Post Your Fundraising Questions. We can see it on our screen now. And so we've tried to select some of the topics that were the most popular with many of the participants here today and many of the questions we received. So here are some examples of the types of questions that we got in the forum.
Yeah, Megan, that's great. I think we got well over 100 questions, and some people in their posts, they asked like 4 or 5 questions, so if you add it all up, it would be too many to all answer, but we've tried to group them and organize them in some way to make sure that most of you will have your question answered in one way, shape, or form. And very typical questions that we got were, where do I find donors? How do I network with donors? How do I approach them? What should I do for fundraising planning? How can I get funding from a specific donor like an embassy or a company or corporate? Some questions about online fundraising, and a lot of questions, of course, about what are good proposals and how do I prepare a good proposal that a donor will like. But we've grouped it, and that's how we've organized this presentation.
So the first section that we'll talk about is where are the donors? So we'll actually start this with a quick poll, and how do you find donors? So if you look at your screen, we're about to launch this question. You can have a few choices. So how do you find donors? Do you do internet searches, for example, Google? Do you ask your colleagues for recommendations? Do you research at libraries? Maybe you use online databases. So just select on your screen whichever way you use best. You can only select one, unfortunately. I'm sure a lot of people do multiple types of research, but what's the best way that you use to research donors? Internet searches, ask colleagues for recommendations, do you research at a library maybe, or use an online database? So we'll take a few more seconds to give everyone a chance to vote. And let's close the poll, and let's share the results with everyone. So we see internet search is the most popular with 57%, followed by asking colleagues for recommendations, and then using online database. And no one's researching at libraries anymore, Eric.
Yeah, that's actually some libraries do have very good donor directories. There are a number of books that list thousands of donors, such as the EU International Foundation Directory, and a lot of libraries and university libraries will have copies of those. So it's still worth looking into, old-fashioned research.
So let's look, we'll go right to an example of a question we received. Here's one from Venancio, who wants to know about how do we find what a donor will fund? There's also some other questions we received. So other ones on the topic, what are good sources of information on funders? That was from Natalia. Are there lists of funders? From Micah. How can I narrow my foundation search? Fern asked that question. And then which donors will pay for training expenses? That was a question from Sahara. And we received quite a few questions similar to that, which type of donors will pay for something very specific to an NGO. So we'll try to answer the question generally so it'll be most interesting to all participants here today. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about it, and then we'll show some more slides?
Yeah, I think to provide very specific answers on, can you give me a list of funders to environmental issues in Uganda, for example, that would be very difficult. And let me explain why, and Megan can go into this a little bit further. There are 100,000 charitable foundations in the United States alone. There are an estimated 50 to 100,000 charitable foundations in Europe. There are probably 50,000 or more foundations in Asia Pacific, including Australia and what have you. So, and then if we add all the bilateral donors, the governments and the development agencies, and we add corporate funders, well, hundreds of thousands of companies that might potentially be funders, you can see what the problem is. There are hundreds of thousands of potential sources of funding. So research is critical to narrow down that huge list to a manageable list of funders that you can work with, that you can approach and pursue.
Thanks, Eric. So one of the ways I think we also kind of saw this in the poll to look at is kind of to talk to your colleagues. And one way we like to start doing research, try to identify donors, try to get to some of these questions we have here, looking at like-minded NGOs. So I'm actually going to go off of the PowerPoint real quick, and actually we'll do that in a minute. We'll look at Global Witness here as a like-minded NGO, perhaps. So you look at NGOs, if you do similar work, Global Witness is a UK NGO that works internationally against environmental and human rights abuses. So if you're working in that field, you can see here, this is just from their website that we took a screenshot of. This is their support from institutional foundations, NGOs, corporate bodies. So I see quite a few large foundations in the UK, like Sigrid Rousing Trust or Zenstrom. I see some Dutch ones, Cordaid, maybe Oxfam Novib as well. So this is quite a good way to start doing some research, is to look, and as we kind of saw that in the poll, people looking towards their colleagues. So that's quite one way.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And I think it's quite typical in the United States, and also for some of the larger NGOs, to list their funders, to list the donors to their NGO organization. For many smaller NGOs, it's not as common, but still, we've looked at donors in for NGOs, grassroots NGOs in India, Nepal, in countries in Africa, etc. And we can often find lists of donors.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge, but I've always been able to find some national or grassroots NGOs that list their donors. So it can take time, but again, it's a free way to do some initial research. And once we've kind of started doing research, it's important to make sure you organize that research so that all your hard work is put to use. So here's an example of a prospect table, or you can make a list or something like that. This is just what we use with some sample headings, the name of the donor, so we see this is filled out for the Gates Foundation, maybe the website, some of the focus areas. We rank donors so you know how to prioritize and which donors